and I want to welcome you to the 30-minute promotional strategy. So I am the Director of Strategic Network Communications at the West Virginia Community Development Hub. This is me. I'm standing in art installations. I'm by Greg Oxley. He's an artist based here in Charleston. If you want to check him out, he's super cool. And so my job here at the Hub is to help West Virginians see that change is possible and that it is happening today. And so that is why I am working with you guys today in this webinar to help you to get better, give you some tools to tell the story of your work, because everyone who is participating in this webinar today is a change maker in West Virginia. And so I want to be able to be a resource for you guys to help you improve in getting your good stories about the good work that you are doing out there in front of people. So let's take a moment and do some housekeeping before we dig in. If you are having problems at any time with hearing the audio, this is the number that you can call from your phone. So try just skipping out on trying to do the audio on your computer and just call in and listen to us. And if at any time just everything completely fails for you, maybe your internet goes out or something like that, you can check in with us over email after the presentation. So about 24 hours after we wrap up here today, sometime tomorrow, I'm going to be sending everyone who registered an email, and that's going to include a recording of the presentation. It'll be linked on YouTube, and also a copy of the PowerPoint. So if you're scrambling to take notes at any point in time, don't worry, you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that I'm using. So if you have questions at any point in time, you can use the chat box, and that is located at the bottom of the screen. And so I'm going to go ahead and say hi to everyone using the chat box, and if you could say hi back to me, you just go to the place where it says write a message, and you can just type in hi or whatever you want to say to greet everyone in the room. Click send, and then you will say hello. So hi to Catherine. Catherine also works with me here at the Hub, and she's going to be helping out. If you have technical issues at any time, you can just type a question into the chat box, and Catherine's going to be keeping an eye on that. So hi to Olivia, Jesse, Alisa, Jennifer, Jenna, Tess, Natasha, Cosby, Judith. Hi to Rosanna. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Okay, so let's dig into the presentation. How are we going to put together our 30-minute promotional strategy? So when we're thinking about a promotional strategy, I want to just give you guys some examples of some instances where you may use a strategy like this one. So maybe you have an event coming up, or you want to run a fundraiser for something that you're doing. If you're a business, maybe you have a product that you're launching. If you're a nonprofit, maybe you have a program that you're launching. Again, nonprofits or businesses, maybe you have a service that you want to get out there. But also this kind of strategy is good for just any time that you need people to pay attention to what you're doing. So maybe the challenge that you're having right now is just, I need more people to pay attention to me. Not enough people know about us, just in general. This kind of strategy can work for that as well. So anytime you're thinking, how do we get the word out there into the world? We need people to participate in some way in what we're doing, you can pull together a strategy like this in 30 minutes or less. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the kind of climate that we are working in right now as people who are trying to get the word out about the good work that we are doing. And that climate is one that is really cluttered. So something that I hear really often in my line of work when I am supporting people and helping to tell their stories is just, what do I do? What do I pick? There are so many things out there, so many different social media platforms, or do I make a flyer, or do I put an ad in the newspaper? Like, there are just so many tools right now. And a lot of that is because of the internet, right? It used to be simpler for us to figure out a strategy to get the word out there. But now we have the internet, and that brought about a lot of different methods for us to communicate about our work. But the nice thing about the internet is now we have a lot of free and low-cost tools. So previously we may have been required to place an advertisement in the newspaper in order to get the word out there, but now we don't necessarily have to do that. So we don't have to spend as much money to reach the people that we want to reach. So I just wanted to acknowledge for you guys that, yes, it's tough right now, and I have built this process to help to acknowledge how tough it is and to help people make some decisions about which platforms or which tactics are we going to be using to help us get the word out there. So, big picture, what is this strategy? It's composed of 4 different parts. The first is a goal. The second is the audience that we're speaking to. The third is messaging. And the fourth are our tactics. So that is what I was just speaking to, things like social media, public relations, getting out there in the news, or placing advertising, things like that. So if you can just put these 4 steps together, which we're going to dig into each one of these, you will have a promotional strategy for whatever it is that you're trying to get out there into the world. Okay, so let's dig into step 1. So the first thing that you want to do is identify what your goal is. So what do you want people to do? What action do you want them to take? And example goals might be something like, I want you to give us money. So that can be for fundraising purposes, or maybe you're looking to bring on new customers and you want them to buy some sort of product from you. But one common goal that you might select is, we need money, right? And you might want to attach an exact dollar figure to that. So with each of these goals, whether it is, we need money, we need you to come out to our event, we need you to participate in our program, or whatever it is that your goal is, it's important to be specific in that goal. Because the more specific you are, the easier it is going to be to clarify the following 3 steps. So say, for example, you pick as one of your goals world domination. So if you're thinking, okay, I need to achieve world domination, you are going to have to come up with a pretty complicated strategy in order to get there, right? So the more specific you can be, the more actionable you can be with your goals, the easier it is going to be to figure out the information for the following 3 steps. Now, I want you to think about, when you're thinking of a goal, to try to limit yourself to 3 goals at most. Even just 1 goal is great. And if you have to go beyond 1 goal, if you have to go up to 3, you have multiple things that you're trying to get at, prioritize your goals. So don't make all things equal. Think about which goal is the most important. So let's say, for example, you're having an event, and also at that event, it's going to be a fundraiser, right? Well, you may want to say that your most important goal is just to get people into the room. Because if you get people into the room, they're going to be likelier to give you money, right? So you're creating a hierarchy amongst your goals. But say like the event is maybe just for show, and the most important thing is just that you need money. So that will help you when you're thinking through the different kinds of tactics that you want to use. Maybe you want to create methods for people to give you money outside of the event space, right? Because getting the money is more important than actually coming to the event. So think about what your goals are and prioritize those goals. The next thing that you're going to think about is your audience. So what kind of people do you want to engage in order to meet your goal? Now, there are two different paths that we can think about when we're defining our audience. And we can go down one path or the other, or we can combine both of these things. The first path that we think about when we're thinking about who our audience is what are the demographics of that audience. So we can get really specific around we're targeting by age or gender or income level or education level. Maybe you're running a program and that program is for kids, specifically an education program for children. So that would be a specific demographic that you're targeting. And then the other path that you can go down are interests that people may have. So the first interest that I have here is people who like cheese. So I'm a cheese lover. Maybe you're a company that sells cheese or whatever it is. I'm just being funny with you guys. Some other interests are maybe people who are parents. So again, if you have that educational program for kids, maybe it's not the kids who are actually the decision makers in that. Maybe it's the parents, right? Or people who are motivated to make a change. So that's a big one with community groups that we work with, right? Maybe if we're just trying to build up a base of volunteers, we're not looking specifically for any one person who has a very specific demographic, for instance. We're just looking at people who are motivated to make change or to create a brighter future in some way. So there's something that I want to point out to you guys with demographics, because demographics can get a little bit tricky, and we want to be sensitive to not using demographics and targeting in this way in order to discriminate against people, right? But if we're being mindful of our demographics, that can actually help us to be more accessible and inclusive. So say, for example, you are targeting people who like cheese, and it turns out that you are finding out that only women like cheese, right? And you're thinking to yourself, well, we don't just want women in the room, right? We want to be reflective of all genders. And so you may want to think about, okay, we need to add in some more interest, or we need to be more specific in calling out which demographics we want to include here, because we don't have an interest in being intentionally exclusive of a specific group of people. So again, I want you to think about when you are defining your audience, try to limit yourself to 3 audience groups. And even at best, just have one specific audience that you're trying to get to. So your audience should never be everybody. Don't think about, for example, if you're a community group, well, our audience is everyone in the community. I just went through an exercise with a community group where we really drilled down into some specific interests that people may have. So again, looking at that idea of change and who is receptive to change in the community. If people aren't aware of the different projects that are going on, who has the kind of mindset where they're going to be willing and interested to listen to different kinds of ideas and be accepting of that idea of change, right? So that's not everybody. We're drilling down into some specific interests that people may have. So the clearer that you are here, the more that you limit yourself, the more that you focus these audiences, the simpler it's going to be later on to choose your tactics. And that'll make a little bit more sense once we actually dig into the tactics piece of it. So the next thing that we're going to be thinking about is our messages. So when we're thinking of messages, we think about what are the 3 things that we want these people to know. So we have our goals, and then we have our audiences picked out. And for that audience, what are the 3 things that we want those people to know? And I'm going to give you 2 of those messages, a little bit of direction for what to think about with those. So the first message is the value that you're bringing to the audience. So ask yourself, for this audience, what is going to be different in their life if they take part in whatever this is? Or another way to think about it is, what problem am I solving for them? So to think about, let's think about like a major company like Facebook, right? So what problem are we solving with Facebook? Maybe it's creating a connection to friends and family, or maybe it's hearing about the kinds of news that are important to our friends and family. So think about that value that you're bringing and in a message that can communicate that value. So if your value is creating a connection to friends and family, then your message might be something like, if you join Facebook, we can guarantee that you are going to be better connected to the people that you love most. So that is a value that you are delivering. Oh, I'm hearing that I am breaking up. And thank you, Catherine. Yeah, let's try calling in and using your phone instead of the computer, because sometimes your internet can interfere with things. Okay, so the next thing to think about is, what action do you want people to think? So we've thought about the value that we're delivering, and the next thing is, what action? So what are we actually asking people to do? And this may relate directly back to your goal. I'm hearing that Deanna is on the phone. If anyone else is having problems with me, like crackling or having trouble hearing me, please go ahead and speak up. So what are we asking people to do, and how can they do it? What action do we need people to take? And that how can we do it piece is really important. because we don't want to just say to people, hey, we need you to give us money, right? We also want to say, hey, we need you to give us money, and here's how you do that online. You can visit this website in order to give us money, or this GoFundMe page maybe, or you can come out to this event, and that's the way that you can give us money. So always pair that action with a little bit of direction on exactly how people can take that action. Okay, so those are two of the three messages, and the third is just anything else that you want to deliver. So I'm sure with whatever it is that you're trying to put out there in the world, there's some important piece of information for your audience to know that may not be contained within that value or that action. Okay, everybody, let's talk about our tactics next. So our tactics are how we are delivering the messages that we have created to the audience that we have selected. So in order to define our tactics, I'm going to give you some steps for an exercise that you can go through that'll really help you to focus in and help you to sort through that challenge that we talked about at the beginning of all of the different tools that we now have to select from in order to get our message out into the world. So I want you to think of one person in your audience who is representative of your audience, and then we're going to take our messages to where that person is. So here are some steps to help you dig into that. When you're thinking about that one person, start by really painting a picture of who that person is. You want to think about what's their name. Give them a specific name. And you may even be thinking about a person who is out there in the real world, in which case you would just use their name. And think a little bit about what do you know about their life? What are their interests, right? Going back to this building the audience piece, but what are the different interests that they hold? Just more specifics to really paint a vivid picture about who this person is. And if this person is an imaginary person, you can even go out there onto the internet and just do a Google image search and maybe find a picture of who that person would be. But that's not necessary. This is a 30-minute strategy, right? But if you have that extra moment, sometimes having an image of the person can help you visualize it even more. So after you've visualized your person, you've given them a name, you've thought a little bit about their life, I want you to ask yourself these questions. And again, know that you're going to be getting a copy of this PowerPoint. It's going to be emailed to you. So if you're scrambling to write all of these down, don't worry, it's going to come to your inbox, or you can just take a screenshot right now. So the questions that you want to think about are they on social media? Are they using email? Is there a place where they're likely to live or to shop? And so on. And I'm going to show you next how these questions map to tactics that you may use. So, are they on social media? If the answer is yes, think about which platforms they're on. Are they using Facebook, or are they using Snapchat? Are they using Instagram, etc.? You want to get the word out on the platforms that they're using. Or maybe you would determine that this audience is not on social media at all, in which case you don't need to worry about using social media to get the word out about this tactic. If you have a page on Facebook, for example, you may want to throw something up there just to be mindful of covering all your bases, but that's not something that you'll need to throw a lot of weight behind if your audience isn't on social media. The next thing to think about, are they emailing? Start building your email list then. Maybe you don't have an email list yet, and so you can't start emailing out to this group of people immediately, but start to be mindful of, if this is an audience that you are going to be regularly trying to engage, how are you getting email addresses from them over time? Do you have a sign-up sheet in your workplace or at every single event you do, or each time you're going to be interacting with people, do you ask them for their email address and if you can add them to your email list? Think about where they live or where they shop. Is there a place where you can put something physically up there, like a flyer on a community bulletin board or something like that? And again, thinking about where they shop or a business that they are likely to frequent, or maybe a nonprofit organization that they're likely to receive services from. You can either partner with that business or organization more formally, or you can just do a promotional partnership with them to say, hey, would you be willing to put the word out there about this thing that I am doing? You can offer to say, and I would be willing to put the word out there about something that you're doing as well, although that's not necessary. And newspaper, the evening news, listening to a favorite radio show. Think about, if they're doing any of those things, how can you get in front of them by engaging those platforms? How do you get on the evening news? How would you do an interview? Or how would you get into the newspaper? Could you get them to write a story about you? Or do you have the money to run an advertisement? So the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about in tactics are, after you go through these questions, you may run into one of two problems. You may end up with too many tactics, in which case you're like, I don't have the time or the money to do every single thing on this list that we've dreamed up. Now, that's where your priorities are going to come handy again. You want to prioritize your tactics. Think about if they are doing all of the things that you have listed out on your tactics list, well, what are the kinds of things that they are doing most often? Where are the places that we can be likeliest to find them? And spend the majority of your efforts in those areas. Now, another problem that you may have is you may end up with too few tactics. You may not have a really strong sense of who this audience is and where they frequent, where they go to get their information, or you may find that this is an audience that is just really tough to reach. And this can happen with our more rural audiences, right? If there are people that maybe don't have access to the internet, or they're in a place where they don't come down into a downtown area frequently where you could put flyers up, you may end up with too few tactics in these cases. And if that comes up, ask someone for advice and support. And this could be a good method for you to use even if you aren't struggling with this too few tactics idea. I often ask people for advice, and I have found that they like to be asked for advice. So I'll give you an example here at the Hub. we wrote a deliverable into a grant proposal recently, and when we were reflecting on it afterward, we thought, there is no way we're going to be able to meet this deliverable. It's too many people for us to reach. How in the world are we going to do this? We promised that we're going to do it. So what we did was we went to someone who was an expert in the area, who was already reaching that audience that we needed to reach and doing it successfully. And we said, this is the challenge that we're having. How would you resolve it? And we got the advice that's going to be able to enable us to meet our goal. And so don't be shy about reaching out to people and asking them for advice if you feel like the tactics that you're using aren't working, or you just don't have enough tactics, you need another trick up your sleeve. Okay, everyone, there's one more thing to think about after we have identified our goal, our audience, our message, and our tactics. And this would happen after the event or the program launch or whatever it is that you're putting out there. And that is to evaluate. So after you've completed the activity, reflect on the work that you did, right? So maybe you had a team of people that you're working with. Get into a room with them and talk about what happened. What kinds of, how many people did you get in the room? What kinds of strategies did you use in order to get people in the room? Were they effective or not? And one really key way to figure out which of your tactics were the most effective is to build in a way to ask people, where did you hear about us, or how did you hear about us? And that can be done through an in-person survey, or it can be done more informally, just working around a room, or it can be done even through an email survey, something like a Google form. That's something that we commonly use in order to ask people evaluation types of questions. Another thing to think about when you're evaluating is, are there some sort of like online analytics available to you? So this would be like if you would use your website for promotion somehow. Do you have Google Analytics tied to that? And you can look back to your Google Analytics to figure out about maybe traffic to your website. So something to think about is, okay, we put a flyer up downtown and we were pointing people to our website, and the day after we put that flyer up, we got a lot of traffic coming to our site, right? So that would be a way to be able to tell, okay, that flyer was effective. And if you're not using a website, or if in addition to you using a website, you're using a platform like Facebook or Twitter, those tools have built-in analytics that you can use, and you can see which posts that you posted that were the most effective, that were getting high numbers of engagement, and you might want to track, say, for example, again, you're doing an event that you did a post, you had a lot of engagement, and then you noticed the day after that post, you got a lot of RSVPs or registration numbers for that event. So those are some example ways that you would evaluate, but the most important thing is just to remember to make space to actually do that. So don't just immediately move on. Even though I know for many of us, our plates are really full, take some time to reflect on what you did. Okay, everyone, that is all that I wanted to teach you today. And now I want to open up the floor for any questions. So if anyone has a question for me, you can go ahead and type that into the chat box, and I will go through and read everyone's questions aloud and answer them. And while people are getting their questions together, I want to remind you about a survey that we're currently running, and the address is up here on the screen. It's just bit.ly/up-at-night survey. And this survey is to help us decide what topics we're going to pick in the future for webinar trainings that we want to do. So let us know what is on your mind, and we will use that feedback in order to create future presentations. So I'm seeing a question here from Catherine. She says, when you are promoting on social media, is there a certain rule of thumb about how often you should post to promote your service without coming off like you are harassing your followers with constant messaging? Yeah, so the rules for this used to be much more strict than they are now. So for example, the rule used to be that you don't post to Facebook more than once a day, and you can post to Twitter as many times as you want, because that was the nature of the platforms then. Well, then Facebook changed how they are delivering your posts to different audience members. So Facebook is a lot more discriminating now in showing the posts that pages and groups post to different audience members. So the rule is still loosely post to Facebook less often than you would post to a platform like Twitter or Instagram, but you can now post to Facebook 2, 3, 4 times a day, and you are not going to start bugging people. Okay, Rosanna says, when we're using email, do you recommend a platform like Constant Contact or sending out manually? What are some best practices? Rosanna, can you clarify for me, when you say sending out manually, do you just mean using your own personal like Outlook or Gmail or something like that? Okay. So it depends on the message that you are sending. So say, for example, we're taking a look at our audience, and we have our broader audience, and then we have some people within that audience that are VIPs that we definitely want to take that action. I may send a marketing email through a platform like Constant Contact to that broad audience if I have their email addresses. But then for those VIPs, those important people that I definitely want to take the action, I'm going to send them personal messages, because the more personal the message is, the likelier it is that people will feel motivated to take action. And in terms of like just platforms in general, I'll let you guys know that MailChimp is my favorite email marketing platform. I think it is the best one out there. Jo Lynn says, what if you need to reach large groups on email? When do the emails become spam? So Jo Lynn, I'm going to assume here that you're talking about sending group messages from a personal email like Outlook or Gmail or something like that. So please clarify if I'm mistaken. But I believe the the magic number there is something like 30 people or more, and that email can start hitting people's spam filters. So if I need to email a large group and I need to use my personal email in order to do that, I will typically send to less than 30 people and send it in batches. Or something else to think about is signing up for a service called Tiny Letter. And Tiny Letter will allow you to send to, it's kind of like a mixture between a platform like Constant Contact or MailChimp and your personal email. So you can have a large group of people uploaded all of their email addresses into Tiny Letter, but when you're actually composing that email, it just looks like a regular email. You don't have to mess around with like adding in pretty photos or anything like that. It just looks like a regular email. And that's what I typically recommend if you are sending to large groups on a regular basis, because Tiny Letter will enable you to send just one time to that group, and you aren't as likely to hit spam filters. And also, you get the benefit of having some basic analytics information. So, for example, you can see who actually opened your email and who did not. Okay, I have a comment from Lori. She says, yes, MailChimp, we had an intern research the available platforms, and MailChimp is by far the best value. Yeah, I'm with you, Lori. So do we have any more questions or comments about the different tactics that we're using? I'm hearing some questions here about email and social media. Are there specific questions that anyone has about reaching out to newspapers, advertising in newspapers, advertising on social media, putting together flyers? How do I put together a flyer? Anything specific like that before we sign off of here? Okay, everybody, I'm not seeing anyone typing, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up for the day. And I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came out and participated in this. If you have any questions at all that pop up for you after this presentation, my email is up there on the screen, e.pepper@wvhub.org, and you're also going to be receiving an email from me within the next 24 hours with a link to the recording for this presentation. You can just respond to that. And I also want to remind you guys about this survey. Your responses will be taken into account, and we'll factor that in planning future trainings. And we're also going to share the results of that survey with other trainers and service providers across the state, so it'll help to inform their decision making as well. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I appreciate having the opportunity to be a resource to you and to help you to tell the story of the good work that you are doing for West Virginians across the state. Everyone take care and have a good day.